You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
A source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high. A lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar and Khateeb. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. And this episode was a webinar that we previously recorded, and actually we did it live. And it's about CPAP adherence. You see, it's about estimated that around 1 billion people every year are affected by obstructive sleep apnea. For myself, I have people in my own family who have had it. And about 80% of those 1 billion people go undiagnosed. And so continuous positive airway pressure, otherwise known as CPAP therapy, is the golden standard when it comes to treating obstructive sleep apnea. The problem, though, is that the adherence to the treatment, otherwise known as can the patient stick to the treatment and using the CPAP machine at night, is actually lower than 50% after the first 3 months of use. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And so essentially by improving the adherence of CPAP therapy, patients can have a higher quality of life. The manufacturer, of course, of the CPAP machines can have increased sales of devices and consumables because you have patients who are adhering to the device, using it for more than 3 months. Of course, there's disposables and everything for that insurance covers. And then durable medical equipment end up reducing labor costs and improve the rate of device and consumables for reimbursement. And so this is why I wanted to have Hamed Hanafi, who is the CEO and founder of NovaResp Respiratory AI, on our show. Their AI software essentially plugs into any CPAP machine and improves that adherence. And so it's such an interesting model of innovation and business model innovation, because on one side, there's a huge need that they're serving by improving patient care through that adherence. But at the same time, this doubles the value in terms of how it provides value to the manufacturer, because all these manufacturers, they want to make sure that the patients adhere to the device, of course, not only for their improved outcomes, but of course, from a business model standpoint, you're able to get reimbursed for that, et cetera. And so if patients are not sticking to their CPAP therapy and they drop off after 3 months, more patients suffer. And of course, the manufacturers lose money. So NovaResp actually positions itself with a value edge that's so interesting on both sides of that value equation. So we have them on the show today to talk more about that and discuss it. And if you're a physician who's listening to this episode, you can actually unlock a CME credit. Go and click the show notes below and you get that CME credit. Just make sure to write down what did you learn and what we do with the information. So with that being said, let's get on to our episode with Hamed Hanafi of NovaResp Respiratory AI. Enjoy. What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to the State of MedTech with a really exciting company and a great founder. That's Dr. Hamed Hanafi, founder and CEO of NovaResp. Hamed, it's so great to see you. How are you doing?
Hi, Omar. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's fantastic. And if you could maybe just angle your camera up just a little bit, that way we can, there we go. That's perfect. Perfect. All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us. So how are you doing, and where are you joining us from specifically?
I'm doing great. You see there's some audience from Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada. So I am here, and the weather is not that cold. It's pretty pleasant. Spring is coming.
Fantastic. Well, great. We have a great topic for today. And before we get into it, just a couple more people will say hi to Rocco from Halifax, Canada. Rocco, you might have a cousin, actually, because there's a guy I know named Ryan LeBlanc down in Pennsylvania who's also in MedTech. So I wonder if there's any relation there. But anyways, let's dive into it. Let me get rid of that banner. So, Hamed, let's start with the first thing, which is if you can kind of give us a little bit of a background on the state of, let's say, sleep apnea and sleep medicine today as it is.
Thanks, Omar. Well, obstructive sleep apnea is a pretty serious disease. It's basically happening by the blockages that happens in the airway during sleep. So growing up, I have a father that I had to go to bed after he did because he snored so loud. And then when he snored, he sometimes would stop snoring, and we're like, okay, great, we can sleep now. And then we're like, is he breathing? Seems to be a really long pause in between his snoring, and then he would wake up gasping for air. We all have people in our lives that have done this. This happens to be obstructive sleep apnea, where your airway is literally blocked and you cannot breathe. So this causes drops in blood oxygen. It causes quite a bit of diseases. It's associated with higher chances of heart attack, higher chances of stroke, type 2 diabetes. And, we all know if we don't sleep well, we're not going to feel well the day after. It's connected to depression, car accidents, and so on. So it's a pretty important disease. And there are solutions that address it, and we can talk about them.
Fantastic. Yeah. And actually, I have people who are in my family who have sleep apnea. I think that it's definitely something where there's a certain, let me ask you this, just in the United States or whatever figure you have, how many people are affected by sleep apnea?
Let's go global. It is estimated that 1 billion people globally are affected by sleep apnea, and it's estimated that it'll go to 1.4 billion people by 2050.
And those are just the people who get diagnosed. Whenever I see a disease, I always say like those are the people who got diagnosed. So because I feel like there's so many other people who don't get diagnosed, right? And so because of globally, weight gain and obesity definitely is an issue when it comes to sleep apnea. A lot of people who are thin also have sleep apnea, but because those things are going up and chronic diseases are going up, like I would not be surprised if that number today is closer to 1.5 billion, maybe even 2. That's kind of like a really aggressive stretch, but it's a huge, huge market, right? And I think the other side of it is, you can get diagnosed, but then what are the options that patients have today when it comes to treating it?
Exactly. And honestly, 80% of those patients that we're talking about are undiagnosed. So the diagnostic market is also exploding right now with all sorts of, at-home diagnostic tools. Samsung just came out with, a 2-day screening of obstructive sleep apnea at home through their watches. And out of those that are diagnosed, they often do not love the treatments that are out there. In the US, there are, out of 20 million people that have been diagnosed, 8 million use CPAP machines. So the low adherence to therapy, low rate of adherence to therapy is a big issue, and it's the driver of the market. But why is that adherence low? Rate of adherence is low. It's because the solution that works in the market are CPAP machines, and CPAP machines are a bit uncomfortable. You have to kind of accept that I have to use this machine and sort of accept that I'm going to have this on my bedside. There's going to be a tube. There's going to be a mask that I'm going to use. And after I accept these, because the chances of those comorbidities and heart attacks and strokes are high for me, I still might wake up during the night realizing there's so much pressure on my face, and I rip off the mask. That ends up, it's in fact Medicare's criteria for accepting reimbursement is using it for a certain number of hours a night. And if you rip it off your face, you're not going to meet that, so your device is not going to be reimbursed. Now, you may ask, what are alternatives to CPAP and why are CPAP so dominant in the market? Is that, there's oral appliances, there are pills that are emerging, but none of them really work on severe sleep apnea. There are neurostimulators that are effective, except they're very expensive and minimally invasive to implant them. And then there's surgery that you don't want to do unless you really have to. CPAPs just pressurize your nasal airway all the way to the end of the time where it often collapses and keeps it open throughout the night. So the therapy works on all severities of sleep apnea, except that it's uncomfortable. And Novartis was here to address that problem.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I think and this is part of the reason why I was excited to have you on the show, is that at least I could be wrong, so no offense to any of the founders out there. There's a lot of diagnostics, there are a lot of treatments, but one of the biggest issues I think in medicine, whether it's pharmaceutical, device, or anything else, is actually adherence, right? And if you solve for the adherence problem, like you end up solving for a lot of like chronic illnesses and everything. And so this is what kind of got my attention about Novartis, was you guys are specifically using AI, on the adherence side. I know you have some slides and some videos. We'll jump into that in a moment, but talk to me like how did you end up starting Novaresp, right?
Yeah. So my PhD is in biomedical engineering, and my focus was on respiratory mechanics, devices and tools to monitor and diagnose and treat respiratory diseases via breathing assisted machines. So I got trained in that. And of course, I started thinking about the problems around me after finishing my studies while working at another startup that worked actually on the anesthesia machines, also breathing assistant ventilators, and came up with there has to be a better way to treat obstructive sleep apnea patients. So came up with a solution at the time. And then a couple of years later, we thought about using AI and using the patterns that repeat on patients before the closure of airway actually happens to see if we can actually prevent them. And that really changed the game. This is basically showing our solution. CPAP therapy throughout the years has been focused on throughout the night, apneas would happen, closures of airway would happen, and CPAP pressure basically after the apnea ups the pressure and keeps the airway open. The pressure stays up for a long time after, gradually reduces, and then another respiratory event happens and pressure keeps going up and very slowly comes back down. And that's why patients experience this high pressure through the mask on their head. Yeah, pressure remains high throughout the night. So this is a big problem. It adds to the discomfort of patients that have already accepted the tube mask, Novorest has a patented AI-enabled software that could be installed on any CPAP machine. The software predicts apneas before they would occur and gently intervenes to prevent them instead of waiting for the apnea to happen, upping the pressure and remaining high throughout the night. The simple analogy we use is that airway is an elastic material. It's kind of like a balloon, party balloon. If you blow up a party balloon at first, we've all experienced this, that it's really hard to push and then it gets easier. Same with the airway. If you let the airway collapse, it's really hard to open it and keep it open. While if the airway is already open, the patterns are showing that it's about to collapse. You can use less amount of pressure to keep it open. So that's the whole idea behind our software, which we've now started testing on patients and it's working, which is pretty promising.
So essentially, it's the software is compatible. So it's platform agnostic, works with any CPAP machine, and essentially it's using what it seems like a feedback loop to adjust that pressure.
Exactly.
And why is adjusting that pressure so important? Is it mainly just in terms of comfort for the patient?
Yeah. So out of, let's say, 100 patients that are diagnosed and are sent home with a trial CPAP through a DME, only maximum 60 of them end up meeting the criteria of 4 hours a night usage of CPAP so that Medicare would cover the cost of their machine. Those CPAPs, those patients that cannot meet that need, they end up returning the CPAPs. Let me switch to the slide that explains this and why this is important. 1 second. Yeah, if you look at this slide, it basically explains the problem. Let's say 100 patients are diagnosed and sent home with the machines. 3 months in, there's 50 to 60 patients that are actually meeting the criteria of reimbursement. If those patients would have used their machine in the first 3 months for over 4 hours a night for 70-75% of those nights, the reimbursement would have existed. However, it doesn't. Why is that important? Because not only the cost of the machine is covered here in a monthly basis up to, until month 13, but also the consumables, the resupply, the tube, the mask, they're reimbursed quarterly. And currently, DMEs and manufacturers are missing on that revenue. Now, why is pressure important here is that a percentage of patients that are on CPAP machine are ripping the mask off due to high pressures. They're on their side, they come on their back, all of a sudden the weight falls on the airway and it collapses and CPAPs cannot keep up. While if you can predict that it's happening, this is going to be way better. That improvement in comfort of patients and helping them cross this line of 4 hours a night will help not only the patients to keep the machines and hopefully reduce from the comorbidities that sleep apnea is causing them, but also it's going to help, CPAP manufacturers and DMEs to cash in here from the solution they're offering, but it's not being adopted. If I move on the next slide, you'll see our value prop, where only by 10% improvement in adherence, we could add quite a bit to the manufacturers in terms of how much
Just
they would
10%.
make. Just 10%. Even 5% would mean hundreds of millions of dollars a year, more revenue for manufacturers, for DMEs. In the first 3 months, DMEs spend a lot of labor talking to patients and making sure that they will adjust everything they can so that they would keep that machine. The labor cost is quite a bit for them. We could reduce those. And most importantly, patients are going to benefit from this. I want to add another dimension to this. If you lower the pressure of therapy, maybe future machines could also not be as cumbersome in terms of a physical presence. Maybe all of a sudden, battery-enabled machines are possible. To add all of this, monetary values for manufacturer and DME and the quality of life for the patient, I want to add a health aspect here as well. There's new emerging science coming up that is promoting stepping away from high pressure therapy, and I'll explain that when we get there.
Perfect. Hamed, I was thinking that we were gonna go through a few things and then get into Q&A. But I have a really good question that just came up. Do you mind if I bring it up for you?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So Anne Guarani has a really interesting question. Her question is: do you have data showing compliance improvement with CMAP versus traditional auto PAP?
That's a great question. So we have so far tested CMAP on home patients that are already adherent. And the reason to do this is that in order to validate an algorithm, first, some of the aspects of leaking the mask and not being familiar with the CPAP, those need to be taken care of. And then the algorithm shows that it's working better than the other one or not. We have that data, and we're getting more of it on an ongoing basis. We're just closing a financial round, and we've just planned a clinical this year in 2024 that'll embark on getting the adherence data, labor costs for the DMEs, and so on. So I'll have that data in a few months.
Fantastic. I'll bring up another comment. I always love doing these streams because it's a great way to sort of bring together like the top thought leaders in the space. So Robin Watke, who is the chief editor-in-chief for Sleep World magazine, says adequate adherence for any therapy is typically multifactorial, including self-efficacy, health literacy, social determinants of health, etc. The pressure is one aspect, but there's also mask fit and patient education involved. So I totally agree with Robin. I'm wondering, Hamed, what's your take on that?
I totally agree with that. That's absolutely true. There is a multitude of factors that go into patient adherence. And what Novartis is addressing is a portion of the patients that are non-adherent due to ripping the mask off, don't liking high pressure therapy. Plus, it's not good for your health, which I will explain that later.
Ripping off the mask is not good for your health. I mean, aside from the fact that you continue with sleep apnea, but
you continue with sleep apnea, and that's a serious issue. So even helping 5% of 1 billion patients globally would be an achievement.
I agree, and I think I agree with Robin's point of view, which is it's a multifactorial thing. That being said, something that we don't know because again, it's hard to measure these things because we're the unique thing about sleep medicine is like it's a lot of its treatments happening in the home and you're not monitoring the patient all the time. Is the percentage of patients who are taking the mask off out of discomfort, and I think I don't have a retrospective study on this, but if you look across pharmaceutical, med device, any kind of intervention, I would imagine that one of the number one reasons for low adherence by patients is due to discomfort or inconvenience.
Yes. So let me bring up a couple of anecdotes from patients that are using our software at home on a modified CPAP that, they normally use anyway. We just modified it, added our software to it in order to get their opinion on how they feel. There are patients that mention how significantly their sleep has improved, how much longer they're sleeping. There are patients that their partners are making a comment about, the leak out of the mask used to hit my face while I was sleeping next to my partner, and now I don't feel that anymore. So there are these.
It's too much pressure that's unneeded.
It is needed if you don't have a predictive therapy. It is needed to keep that airway open. But what we do is that we reduce your need for pressure to keep your airway open because we predict and prevent apneas. And Robin is absolutely right. There are so many factors that go into adherence, and we're not here to solve all of them. At the end of the day, CPAP is a method to keep the airway open with air pressure through a mask and a hose. We are helping with a percentage of patients that are suffering from high pressure therapy.
So with NovaRest, what your product is it's purely SaaS. There's no disposable hardware.
Purely SaaS, a software that could be installed on any CPAP machine because it uses the sensors that are already available on it. We didn't want to add sensors because the discomfort of the hardware is already there. If you add a patch here and there, it makes it even harder.
How come? Because I'll use an example like ResMed is one of the players that I know that's massive. Like, why hasn't any of the larger manufacturers incorporated this kind of software feedback yet? Like, why is it that a startup is? I know the answer because this is why I'm in the startup meeting. But like, why is it that no major manufacturer has solved this issue yet?
I think it's because startups can afford and they're built to look at specific problems and focus on that fully and solve that problem fully. While established companies are, they're already helping, like ResMed is helping over 20 million patients globally, I believe. I think the number is higher than that. So their focus is to improve things as fast as they can. But when you're, addressing so many patients, these niche issues are usually brought up by startups, solved, presented to manufacturers. And if the results are good, manufacturers could install this software on their.
Fantastic. So I know that currently you guys are, fundraising and I believe closing soon. What are some of the big milestones NovaRest has for the year, and where are you guys, I guess, in your regulatory pathway?
So we're closing this round, and the round basically funds the studies that are upcoming. We're starting one next week. And we're starting another study the week after that exactly addresses the other question that came up about, have you studied exactly what percentage of adherence you can improve? So that's a large study on 200 patients that we're going to execute at home, and we're going to exactly measure what's our improvement on adherence. And we are also continuing our validation of the software on currently already adherent patients at home. And I bring that up because here's another reason why larger companies haven't looked into addressing this, is that this is basically a bit ahead of the state-of-the-art science that's out there. We theorize that by predicting a specific apnea, we can prevent it with lower pressures. No one had tried this before. We tried and it worked. So we're basically moving science and publishing along the way with really well-known sleep doctors, respirologists, and neurologists that brings this science forward. And all of a sudden, now we're slowly showing in peer-reviewed publications as well that it looks like you can do low-pressure therapy and have the same effects that CPAP therapy has, more comfortable for the patient. Brand new. No one has done it before. So that's another reason why startups are often more agile and innovative.
Yeah, and what I like, and maybe I'm sure if I did some more research, I can find other examples. I like the sleep medicine space because it seems like, you have these very, very large players and the technology moved very fast. So there's a focus just on the sleep apnea tech, but then there's all these other startups that have come out to enhance these things. So kind of a great example, and I see Novaresp on the other side of things. So pre-diagnosis, diagnosis was a big issue. And even me, I've had a sleep study, but you have to go to the sleep center, you have to sleep there at night, you have to have all these notes, everything. And so like Itmar was a great example as like an at-home sleep diagnostic company. And they essentially got acquired by I actually forgot who they got acquired by. They got acquired by actually here. I'm going to I need to Google that real quick. Zoll, there we go. Zoll acquired them. And so on the other side of it is that once you have the diagnosis done, like the adherence is a really big thing, and any medical device company, the one business model you'll see is not necessarily the sale or placement of the technology, it's the utilization of it. And so this is kind of why I'm very excited for Novaresp is that, whether it's a larger company or even let's say a startup who maybe has a new CPAP device, you kind of provide some insurance for adherence and utilization of a product.
To be honest, CPAPs were invented years back. The improvements on them have been pretty impressive. Companies like ResMed, Philips, Fisher Paykel, Lewinstein, the companies out there, and a recent company, React Health, they've pretty much brought the CPAPs to an extent that they could improve in terms of like humidification was added later, the ramp algorithm was added later. Everything that could be done to improve patient comfort has been done. It kind of saturated. So by bringing this new actual use of AI to therapy and improving patients' comfort to an extent, in the meantime, we're really breaking ground here.
So a couple questions came up. So one Anne has this question, which is, will this software potentially negate any manufacturer warranty on the equipment? More of a legal question. I don't know if you can answer that, but just like that is actually an interesting question.
We're not selling the software to customers. We're going to work with manufacturers. We're going to license this.
There you go.
Or work with manufacturers to. We're not selling the software separately.
Got it. Perfect. And then the other question was, Robin did ask you, was that, are you considered software as a medical device? So yeah, how does, what's the classification for Novaresp?
That's a great question as well. Yeah, I did miss that part of your question. Sorry. So software as a medical device is considered software as a medical device, is not considered software as a medical device if you are controlling a piece of hardware. So we're a non-MDSAP ISO 13485 compliant company that the manufacturer that would have our software on it will have to do either joint or separately a small trial to get the software approved on that specific hardware.
Got it. That's interesting here. Yeah, and especially I think decide. So something I'll ask that maybe some of the investors who are listening to this might be wondering, which is if the success of your company falls on your ability to directly sell to and partner with manufacturers, how are you going about doing that? And how many are there? Like, what does that market look like? Because at least when I think of sleep medicine, I just think of the big names like like ResMed, for example, or GE. But more or less, what does that market look like? Like roughly, how many CPAP companies are there out there?
There are a number of. ResMed is their top company. Philips is also a big company. However, they've been dealing with a recall. There are other companies such as React Health, Fisher Paykel, Lewinstein. There used to be Diligence. There are some major companies out there. There's CFM. However, there are also many small companies because the market is so large that you can still have
it's a huge market.
And if a and then another application of this software, prediction and prevention of upcoming respiratory events, that our patents cover, CPAPs are simple ventilators. Ventilators are in the ICU, anesthesia machines are in the OR. And
I've never heard somebody say that, but you're absolutely right. I never considered. Can you, and please dive in a little bit more on the predictive side of NovaResp, because you guys really focus a lot on the concept of adherence, but the prediction and precision side is fascinating.
Yeah, so I'll show you a simple example of prediction of an apnea. If you can please share this video.
The video that's
that I uploaded here.
Here we go. Let's bring it up.
Yeah, so up top you see the probabilities of upcoming no apnea coming, which is normal breathing, and then if we can pause it for a sec. I'm going to bring it back. No upcoming apnea is normal breathing. There's obstructive apnea, central apnea, and hypopnea. You see the probabilities out there that our software that it's predicting is spitting out. You see airflow of pressure and airflow of breathing and pressure of breathing. Around 110 seconds on the x-axis, you will see that breathing gets abnormal, so that's sort of flow limitation-like, and you see that the probability of normal breathing drops and the probability of obstructive apnea rises. Right here, we know when obstructive apnea is coming, but let's see what happens to the airflow and pressure. Patients still breathing but abnormally. Eventually, patients breathing completely. Now the machine sends the forced oscillation technique signal to see if it's an obstructive apnea or a central apnea. And when they know it's an obstructive apnea, they up the pressure of therapy and continue to do so. That's normal therapy. Our therapy says, if I predicted this apnea here, I can prevent it. And now we have data to show that.
Now, what does that mean? When you say, so a patient has their CPAP already, right? When you say being able to predict the apnea, if you're able to do that, why is that important? Because isn't it already solved by the patient having a CPAP machine? So why is it important to be able to predict an apnea?
Great question. So this is a patient on a CPAP machine.
Right.
They're still getting an apnea. So apnea severity, currently at least, is measured by something called an AHI, which is an apnea hypopnea index. If CPAPs drop the apnea like my dad's AHI would be 70. That means 70 times an hour he stops breathing. Just think about how important that could be. So CPAP could drop that under 5 events an hour.
Okay.
But the events still happen. And there are events that don't count in AHI. Regardless, those events, when they happen, this is a patient on CPAP and they're still getting an apnea. After they get it, pressure ups. If this patient was getting 70 apneas, the pressure would skyrocket. But because it's under 5, pressure still remains under 20 centimeters of water throughout the night.
Interesting.
Goes up and down.
And so essentially your ability to predict the apnea means that you're able to give a feedback loop to the sensor to increase pressure and try and get that number as close to 0 as possible.
Exactly.
Because we still, so that's fascinating because now, we know the chronic effects of apnea over time, but, there's still some effect if you end up having an apnea a few times an hour, right? 5 is still a lot, right? And on average, when someone stops breathing, how long do they usually stop breathing for on average?
At least 10 seconds. That's the definition of an apnea. But Omar, I want to add something here. Studies have shown that if you drop the AHI under 5, and there is a reason they choose 5, is that the consequences of obstructive sleep apnea reduce so much that you can consider that patient treated. So the point of this software, although as a scientist at first may have been motivated by reducing the number of apneas, the point of this software is now, okay, effective therapy is happening. What if we keep the effective therapy as is at a lower pressure, which is more comfortable? And I want to add to that. There was just research 7 days ago, a paper by Hecker et al. Kind of got published and is sort of bringing up an issue with CPAP therapy that hasn't been brought up before. a lot of the patients with obstructive sleep apnea or, at risk of getting heart attacks and having heart diseases. CPAPs are known to help patients with OSA not get those heart attacks. However, statistical analysis on patients that are using CPAPs haven't necessarily proved on specific patients that this is working. Now, this paper comes out that says that shows increased morbidity and mortality on patients on CPAP after a coronary revascularization. They speculate in a high number of patients that they treated. They realized that if their pressure of therapy on CPAP was lower than a certain range, the chance of morbidity and mortality was lower. And if it was higher than a certain level, the chances are higher. So their conclusion in this paper is, in fact, we recommend to increase the AHI, but reduce the pressure, because you don't want to end up with inflammation that is caused by high pressure CPAP therapy. That it's very similar to something we talked about ventilators. Ventilator-induced lung injury, or VILI, is a well-known factor because it pushes so much air into your lungs. And CPAP can have that effect as well, which could, for patients with coronary artery disease, for patients with COPD, for patients with cancer that are vulnerable to inflammation, high pressure therapy could really hurt them. This emerging science is pretty interesting because we could change the recommendation of it's okay, increase the AHI, have some OSA, but take care of the heart attacks that may be coming. Instead, we could say we can do CPAP therapy and help both OSA patients and heart disease patients.
Fascinating. When you have your partnerships like with different companies, are you able to write it into your like contracts where there is like you're able to share data?
Absolutely. With manufacturers, we'll sign an NDA and we'll present the data. At the end of the day, we want this algorithm to help patients and reach out to as many patients globally as possible. I think everybody at Novarest's motivation is first to help patients. A lot of our first volunteers that the algorithm got developed on are people's aunts and uncles and parents. We all have a passion for this and want to help.
Fantastic. I have a couple of other people who made some comments. Let me bring up one. So Tom Miller says less pressure is needed to keep an airway open than to open a closed airway. So predicting an even and treating it should lower overall pressure. Agreed, Hamed?
Agreed.
Okay. Fantastic. Yeah, and I think what I think is also interesting is again, it's rare, and this is why I really was enjoying learning more about Novarest. For those who are listening, you can learn more. Just go to novaresp.ai. Very important when you raise money. You got to get that domain with the .ai on it.
Except that it's real. We are using AI.
Yeah, you guys are using AI. That's true. There's a lot of companies who, there's this funny meme where it says like when you're raising money, you say AI, but when you're hiring people, it's ML. But again, Novarest is actually using AI, which is why I wanted you on the show. But something I thought was also interesting is that considering how, after you guys raise money and you commercialize, I think Novarest can be marketed as a really beneficial feature, for a device. So if a patient's trying to make a decision or a doctor's making a decision as to which device they want to recommend to a patient, the more educated a clinician is about Novarest, the more likely they'll say, yeah, I would actually prefer a patient using the one that comes with the Novarest feature. Is that would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think that also plays into the regulatory side of it. So this could be a feature, the predictive and preventative feature could be a feature that could be added to current modes of therapy, or it could be its own mode of therapy with its own reimbursement code. It all depends on how the manufacturers would wanna work with the software.
Fantastic. Well, Hamed, I don't know if I'll give the audience a few more minutes just to see if there's any other questions that are rolling. But as we kind of wrap up, is there anything else you want to share slide wise? Any comments? Anything that we haven't touched on yet?
No, I think this has been and thank you for all the questions that you asked and the audience asked. Very intriguing questions and right questions. I look forward to continually bring our findings forward and share with everyone. And I think there is a couple of very exciting months ahead of us in 2024, because I can't wait for the data to come out.
Absolutely. And for those who are watching, maybe if you're seeing this on the recording, if you have a question, please, he's very active, and I actually recommend following him because he puts out great content. Go ahead and reach out to Hamed directly on LinkedIn. I went and put his handle in the comments. So with that being said, I want to thank the audience for listening. If you're watching or listening to this on recording, please be sure to subscribe to the State of MedTech. Give us 5 stars and write a review. I'm your host, Omar M. Khateeb, and this has been another episode of the State of MedTech. We'll see you all later. And Hamed, thank you so much for joining us. I want to wish you and Novarest best of luck. And I believe will you be at LSI USA this year?
I'll be at LSI.
Fantastic.
It's the best MedTech event every year.
That's right. It really is the best MedTech event. I'm literally counting down the days, so I can't wait. So big shout out to Scott Pentel, Henry Peck, and their team over there. They just do a phenomenal job. So I'm excited. So we'll see you there, brother. All right, everyone, take care.
Thank you for enjoying another epic episode of the State of MedTech. If you're feeling inspired and love this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you never miss an episode. And be sure to give us 5 stars and write a short review, because that helps more people discover this amazing community of ours. If you're a company who has a executive that you'd like to be on the show, or perhaps you want to sponsor one of the episodes, shoot us an email at hello@khateebandco.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.